How are you guys doing? Today is Thursday, January 7th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do another individual elite profile on Lamar Jackson, the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, who in a short amount of time has put together one of the best NFL resumes that anybody's ever seen. Today is January 7th, 2021, so today Lamar Jackson turns 24. He has the same birthday as Ozzie Albies, the elite second baseman for the Atlanta Braves, but in this individual profile, I'm going to give a little bit of context and my reasoning as to why I believe that going into 2021, Lamar Jackson will be a player that stands out for from the rest, and going into his playoff game this weekend and just going into the 2021 NFL season in September. Lamar Jackson's season is definitely a season to watch. So if you're unfamiliar with Lamar Jackson, he is now a 24-year-old quarterback from Pompano Beach, Florida. He stands at about 6'2", 212 pounds. As an individual player, he's probably just he's incredibly athletic. He's incredibly shifty, and he's a very smart and he's a very smart and talented quarterback. He throws the ball incredibly well. He makes incredibly smart decisions in the red zone. Up until now, he's never thrown an interception in the red zone ever since he's been in the NFL. Every year he's been in the NFL, he's gotten his team to, or at least every year that he started, he's gotten his team to the playoffs. And he's put together rushing seasons that even dwarf Mike Vick's elite rushing seasons. And at the same time, he's still an amazing passer. And not to mention, this guy won the Heisman too, so he was able to do it kind of on every stage. And I think going forward, Lamar Jackson is going to be one of the most. He's probably going to be one of the most amazing and one of the biggest ticket items to watch in the NFL moving forward. So, coming out of Pompano Beach, he was recruited to go play at Louisville. And under Bobby Petrino, his first season at Louisville will be in 2015. His freshman season, and in this season, he would start 8 games, and he would eventually play 12 in a season where the Louisville Cardinals would finish 8-5. And they would eventually win the Music City Bowl. In this season, as a freshman, Lamar Jackson would throw for 1,840 yards with 12 touchdowns and 8 picks. Then he ran for 960 yards to give him about 2,800 yards on the season. Overall, just a great season from him. Of course, as a freshman, to be able to do that in Louisville, in the ACC of all conferences, I mean, it's an impressive feat to do so after being one of the best high school quarterbacks in Florida. So going into 2016, as a sophomore, Lamar Jackson would kind of pick it all up and probably have one of the best college football seasons anybody's ever seen. In his sophomore season at Louisville, he would complete 56% of his passes, a little over what he did the previous year before. He threw for 3,543 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. He also ran for 1,571 yards, so he ran for 1,600 yards on top of his 3,500 to give him over 5,000 yards of total offense. And with his 30 passing touchdowns and his 21 rushing touchdowns over the 13-game stretch, he would have 51 he'd have 51 touchdowns on the season, and he'd only throw 9 interceptions on the season. And in this season, Louisville will go on to finish 9-4 in the season, finishing first within their division of the ACC. They'd lose to Clemson in the ACC championship game, and they would eventually lose in the Citrus Bowl. In this one, they would lose to LSU. But Lamar Jackson would have probably one of the best seasons in college history. He would win the ACC Player of the Year, the ACC Offensive Player of the Year, Sporting News Player of the Year. He was a unanimous All-American for the only time in his career. He won the Heisman. So, of course, just Lamar Jackson's Heisman season, even among Heisman seasons, was an elite Heisman season. And then going into his last season, where, of course, he had already won the Heisman, going into his junior year at Louisville, he would start 13 games in a season where Louisville would go 8-5 under Bobby Petrino. Yet again, they would lose this time in the Tax Slayer Bowl to Mississippi State. But in this season, Lamar Jackson would throw for 3,660 yards, more yards than the previous year. He also ran for 1,601 yards, which was 30 more yards than the year prior. That would give him 5,000 yards combined for the second consecutive season, and he would finish with 45 touchdowns. So, I mean, 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns in a 13-game season. This man was able to achieve that feat twice, but after this, he wasn't named to... He was the ACC Player of the Year and the Offensive Player of the Year, but he wasn't a unanimous All-American, wasn't the Heisman winner, but following off that year, that's probably one of the best ways you can do it, by basically mimicking that production and showing that he was a good. And through that, he showed that he was a good enough prospect to be taken 32nd. He was the last overall pick in the 2018 draft, and he was picked up by the Baltimore Ravens, where he now is currently the starting quarterback. And then going into his starting season, because he was fighting for the starting spot with Joe Flacco at first. He would start 7 games and then play all 16 games in the 2018 season, his age 21 season. In this season, he would finish with he would have a 6-1 record as a starter in a season where the Baltimore Ravens would finish with a 10-6 record, winning the AFC North. And in the 16 games that he played, he would throw for 1,201 yards and 6 touchdowns against 3 interceptions. And then on the ground, he'd run for about 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, which would give him about 1,900 yards in his rookie season. And then when he took over, he would have a 6-1 record. I mean, without him, they finished 10-6, so they were 4-5 until he started, and then he was able to lead them into the playoffs, where they took on the Los Angeles Chargers in the first round and lost by 6. But I mean, of course, but for a first season, that was the first time that the Ravens made the playoffs since 2014 after a 3-game skid. Lamar Jackson, his first half season starting, he was able to lead the Baltimore Ravens into the playoffs, and even though they lost, he was still able to get them there in the first place. So and this would lead to Lamar Jackson, probably one of his best seasons ever, his first full season as a starter in the NFL. He would start 15 games and play 15 games in a season where the Baltimore Ravens would finish with a 14-2 record, as they won the AFC North, and I believe if the Chiefs didn't have the best record, the Baltimore Ravens probably did. But going into the season, Lamar Jackson would he would have a 13-2 record himself. He would complete 66% of his passes, throwing for 3,127 yards. He led the league in passing touchdowns with 36 of them. He had 36 passing touchdowns against 6 interceptions. He led the league in QBR, and at the same time, while throwing for over 3,000 yards, he ran for a total of 1,206 yards and then 7 touchdowns. He had 42 total yards of offense. He led the league in passing touchdowns, while also breaking the single-season NFL rushing record, which at 22 years old was to show you how amazing that that is an amazing feat to accomplish, of course, at that age. Following that season, Lamar Jackson was, of course, voted. He was named to his first ever Pro Bowl, his only Pro Bowl to date. He was named to the first team All-Pro for the only time in his career, and he was named the MLB's most valuable player, or the NFL's most valuable player for 2019, and he was also named the number 1 on the NFL Top 100 list for 2020, following the 2019 season. He had the most rushing yards in a season by a quarterback with 1,206. He had the most rushing attempts by a quarterback in a season with 176. And that's the first of his 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons that I'll get to in a second. But following this season, the Baltimore Ravens would lose to the Tennessee Titans 28-12 after Derrick Henry put up a monster performance and the defense was able to contain Lamar Jackson. John Harbaugh also won the Coach of the Year, and then Greg Roman was able to win the Assistant Coach of the Year award, or the Assistant Coach of the Year. But this was an incredible season to kind of follow, and just following that, the current season that he's in we're currently in the season that followed his 2019 MVP season, and in this current season following his MVP season, Lamar Jackson would start and play in 15 games in a season where the Ravens would finish with an 11-5 record. They finished second in the AFC North, and they are currently sitting in the NFL playoffs against the Tennessee Titans with a game on Sunday, January 10th, 2021. So right now we are sitting before that game. I have no idea as to how that game's going to play out. But going into that game, the going into this game in this season, Lamar Jackson would finish with an 11-4 record as the starting quarterback. He completes 64% of his passes, the second time he completed at least 60% of his passes. He threw for 2,757 yards against 1,005 yards on the ground. The first time any quarterback in history has rushed for over 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. First time it's ever been done. And then adding on to his 3,700 yards of passing, he threw for 26 passing touchdowns and he ran for 7 rushing touchdowns. So he had 33 total touchdowns and 3,700 yards. Not as great as his first season, but that's still a very elite season when you kind of compare it to other seasons. And he only threw 9 interceptions on the season. And with all this, the Baltimore Ravens were able to finish with an 11-5 record. And as it currently sits, the team that's facing them right now is the team that eliminated them from the 2019 playoffs after Lamar Jackson's MVP season. So with that said, we are currently sitting and waiting as to how that game's going to play. But going into that game, as of right now, Lamar Jackson is one of the most elite quarterbacks to ever play the game. He just turned 24 today, so happy birthday to him. And he's just a player that if you're not watching Lamar Jackson, then you're definitely missing out. He's just an amazing talent that he's a generational talent that you rarely see that's able to run and throw the ball in a very elite fashion. But with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece, and hopefully as Lamar Jackson continues to fill out his legacy, these videos will get longer and longer as he accomplishes more throughout his career. But I want to thank everyone for listening once again to this piece. Today is Thursday, January 7, 2021. And following this, I'm going to do a piece on Jean Oblak, the starting goalie for Atletico Madrid. And once again, last time, check out my boy Lamar Jackson. He is that man. Currently wearing number 8 for Baltimore. He is currently a Heisman winner and an NFL MVP winner, and he just turned 24 today. So once again, thank you for listening to my piece, and peace out. I'll catch you with an episode right after this.